Hello everybody, this is Gregory with How I Lost Over 100 Pounds and have kept it off for 30 plus years, where there should be no hesitation in your weight loss and weight maintenance. Today we're going to talk about how to get to the point where you can pretty much eat anything and not think that a food is bad or food is good. Now before we begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. Also check out my website, which has hundreds of articles and recipes, my course on how to lose weight and keep it off for a long time. And if you like podcasts, I have 4 of them, one of them being The Awakened Man and the other one being The Cinema Rag, which is on movies. And lastly, if you appreciate my content, there is a link for PayPal. All right, so most people who are losing weight or trying to keep it off have a mindset, understandably so, that this food is bad, this food is good, I need to stay away from this. And certainly there are going to be foods that are going to make it harder for you to lose the weight and keep it off. Like for example, if you have a diet of eating 12 donuts a day, probably going to be harder. So is this a bad thing that you're identifying food as good or bad? Well, we have an episode here on should you identify foods as being good or bad? And I would tell you overall, that's a bad mindset because food can't be inherently good or bad. It's food. It's an inanimate object. The problem is that we connect emotion to food. And that's where the problem is. So if you think white cake is bad, it's not bad, it's just white cake. But when you're losing your weight or you're trying to keep your weight off, you still kind of have this mindset like, well, I can't eat cheeseburgers, I can't eat white cake, I can't eat chocolate bars, I can't do this, I got to eat kale all day. And look, on one level, it is good to have some sort of rubric of these are foods I should eat more of, these are foods that I need to eat less of. But eventually, kind of like with Buddhism and nirvana, trying to reach these higher levels of enlightenment to the point where you reach nirvana, you want to get to a point where I've gotten to this point where I can eat anything. And why can I get to that point? Well, because I know that I'm not liable to overindulging in food. Why am I not liable to overindulging in food or binge eating like I did in my childhood? Well, because I broke that chain. I severed the chain that connects emotion to food. I've severed that chain that led me to be a dysfunctional eater as a child, because it was a coping mechanism because I had a depressed mom and a rageaholic father. If you want more information, go to that playlist I have here called Confessions of an Obese Child. But I used to turn to food for nurturance, and that's why I had a disordered relationship with food, because I would just feed the pain. You guys can relate to this, or later on you drank the pain. And I broke that. I did the deep work to fix that. And so you get to a point where you eat food just to eat food. Like I talk about with the dog, right? The dog is hungry, he eats, he walks away. Now granted, you give a dog white cake, he'll eat that. You give a dog anything, they'll pretty much eat everything. But even if you leave like, I don't know, like a wedding cake of cake, he's not going to eat it all at one time. He just this is way too much sugar, and walks away. Think of the 4-year-old, right? When the 4-year-old eats, it's the same thing. They just eat until they walk away because they don't have a disordered relationship with food. So eventually you want to get to this higher level where, yeah, I could eat cake right now, no big deal, or I could have chocolate nuts, or I could have a Slurpee, or whatever it is. I can get to this point because I know that I'm just going to have a certain portion of it, and I'm not going to overindulge, and I'm not going to eat a certain portion of it 6 times a week or anything like that. And that's the goal. That is the goal, is where you just see food for what it is. Like, we don't overthink about air. Air is mostly nitrogen. It's inert. We don't use it. So we think of air as oxygen. But we don't think about, I got to breathe in. I got to breathe in every 5 seconds, right? We don't think of it. It's involuntary, kind of like making saliva is involuntary, or blinking, right? So we want to get to the point where we don't have to think about food all the time. We're not obsessing over food. I talked about it, I think in the locked cabinet episode, where literally when I was a fat kid at school, I'd be thinking about the food that was locked in the cabinet, because my parents would lock the junk food because I knew when I got home I would just binge eat it behind their back. And I got so bad that I broke the lock so many times. But I would literally have conversations with the ding dongs that were in there. And the ding dongs were like, come get me. And I'd be like, I really want to have you. Come get me. So we don't want to have this kind of weird relationship with food. We want to see food for what it is. Hungry. Eat sensible portion. Put it away. And that's the goal. And it's going to take you a long time to get there. And that's not to say that I'm complacent and I'm bragging that I won't lapse or anything like that. Of course, you never know. But that's the goal, right? It's all these steps forward, and then sometimes you step back, but then you're already really high up and you keep moving and step back and so forth. And that's where we want to get. And ultimately, fad diets don't work, New Year's resolutions don't work, marathon goal setting doesn't work unless you break this chain of associating emotions with food and break the chain of the childhood trauma. And I would tell you that's the best thing to do. So even though it's a lot of work in the long run to maybe go to therapy and get to the deep work, and it might be hard for you to deal with these demons, in the long run, once you deal with it, then you're not going to have the yo-yo dieting and the crash and the fad and all these things like that. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.